Hey there, my name is Gabriel Constantin, and today I will be presenting on human rights violations in China's correctional system. Specifically, I will be focusing on the state-sanctioned practice of forcible organ harvesting and what this further reveals about power, punishment, and the sociological logic of corrections. My guiding research question is, how does the practice of forcible organ harvesting reflect broader principles of social control and punishment within China's correctional system? In order to explore this, I will draw on a mix of academic sources, including Junker 2018, Lee 2018, and Zarokostas 2006, as well as Lewis 2018, who provides a detailed sociological and ideological analysis of the Falun Gong. I also incorporate major investigative reports such as Rogers 2021 and the Gutman, Kilgore, and Matas 2016 article Bloody Harvest, the Slaughter Update, which synthesizes hundreds of independent data sources. I will also be using concepts from Foucault of biopolitics, Goffman of total institutions, and Garland's culture of control to back up my argument. Finally, I will be using a non-academic but highly credible piece of journalism, the BBC's podcast Heart and Soul, Finding Falun Gong. These sources allow me to approach the topic from empirical, theoretical, and human perspectives. My goal is not just to simply restate that human rights violations occur. Instead, I want to show how organ harvesting functions as an extreme extension of penal power, where the state does not simply punish bodies, but rather uses them as political, ideological, and economic resources. This reframes corrections as a project of biopolitical domination, rather than one of crime control. Slide 2. The Chinese penal system. The Chinese penal system is often framed under the language of re-education, which implies that rehabilitation also occurs. However, Lee 2018 emphasizes that re-education through labor, also known as Laogai and Laojiao in China, has always served as a tool of ideological conformity and political discipline. The goal here is not behavioral change, but rather ideological purification. China's correctional network extends far beyond prisons into a wide array of total institutions, such as labor camps, psychiatric hospitals, black jails, and mass internment centers. These spaces blur the boundary between criminal punishment and political repression. Targeted groups, like political dissidents, Uyghur Muslims, and especially Falun Gong practitioners, are not detained for conventional crimes. Instead, these individuals are classified as ideological threats by the government. Lewis 2018 explains that the Chinese state framed Falun Gong as a heterodox cult, constructing them as morally deviant and socially dangerous individuals. This ideological reframing made harsh treatment appear justified. This supports Garland's idea that modern penal systems increasingly manage quote-unquote dangerous populations rather than choosing and attempting to rehabilitate them. This also provides the institutional backdrop in order for organ harvesting to exist. Rogers 2021 argues that forced organ harvesting cannot be understood outside of political framework. It is not a random abuse, but rather it is embedded deeply within a system that already utilizes detention, dehumanization, and secrecy as mechanisms of social control. Slide 3. Case study, the Falun Gong. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a modern Chinese spiritual movement that combines Buddhist and Taoist moral philosophy with a set of slow meditative exercises. It was founded in 1992 by a man named Li Hongzhi, a man who is viewed by members as an all-powerful spiritual healer, according to BBC 2023. It emerged during the Qigong boom in post-Mao China, when millions of Chinese citizens turned to traditional health and spiritual practices for meaning and well-being. Lewis 2018. At its core, Falun Gong teaches moral cultivation based on the principles of truthfulness, or Zen, compassion, or Shan, and forbearance, or Ren. Practitioners believe that cultivating these virtues, alongside performing Qigong-style exercises, purifies the body and mind, improving health and elevating one's spiritual state. The movement has no formal membership, no temples, and no required donations. Instead, it emphasizes personal cultivation and volunteer-led practice sites. That's according to Lewis 2018 and BBC 2023. In the late 1990s, Falun Gong had grown rapidly, with estimates ranging from 10 to 70 million practitioners across China, according to Gutman, Kilgore, and Matas 2016 and Lewis 2018. Its size, independence from the Communist Party, and moral teachings positioned outside state ideology created rising suspicion among Chinese authorities. While the religion is one based on peace and meditation, it also contains fringe beliefs, such as that of cancer being the result of bad karma or anger, and that diseases, such as hepatitis B, can be cured simply by meditation, and that medication is not required. These strong health beliefs allegedly result in frequent deaths from the commonly curable diseases due to the refusal of medical treatment, according to BBC 2023. These strong beliefs are some of the justification that the Chinese government has cited for the banning of the religion. The 1999 crackdown on Falun Gong marks a major shift in the Chinese state's correctional logic. As Lewis 2018 demonstrates, Falun Gong's rapid growth and spiritual independence challenge state authority, prompting the government to redefine the group as a cult and a national threat. This stark reclassification legitimized surveillance, arrests, and indefinite detention of members of the religion. The BBC's Finding Falun Gong podcast provides powerful testimonies from former detainees. Many describe repeated medical tests, such as blood draws, ultrasounds, and organ health checks, all of which having no connection to the individual's alleged crimes or labor assignments. These tests align with what Rogers 2021 identifies as pre-transplant compatibility screening, conducted on detainees in a total non-medicalized context. Gutman, Kilgore, and Matas document this pattern across hundreds of accounts, arguing that Falun Gong detainees formed the single largest pool of organs, and this is due to their perceived political reliability, as most members of the religion are non-criminal, non-smoking, and non-drinking. Goffman's concept of the mortification of self is very clearly visible here. Detainees lose not only their identity and autonomy, but also they lose full control of their own bodies. The case shows how ideological labeling enables the state to slide from punishment to bodily exploitation. Slide 4. Forcible organ harvesting. Forcible organ harvesting involves the extraction of vital organs, often while the individual is still alive, without their consent, and frequently is for commercial transplantation purposes. The state of China denies these allegations. However, large-scale evidence strongly suggests otherwise. Zaro Costas, 2006, describes early United Nations inquiries into China's extremely short transplant wait times, some even as short as 1 or 2 weeks. This timeline has proven to be totally medically impossible without an on-demand source of organs. Gutman, Kilgore, and Matas further analyze hospital capacity, transplant volume, and revenue data, concluding that China's transplant system operates simply far beyond its official acknowledged numbers. Their reports suggest that tens of thousands of unexplained transplants occur each year in the country. Rogers 2021 evaluates competing evidence claims and emphasizes the convergence of medical testing patterns, survivor testimony, transplant numbers, and secrecy in detention centers. Together, these patterns strongly support the existence of a detainee-based organ supply chain. From a penal theory perspective, this represents a total inversion of the correctional purpose. Punishment becomes extraction, and the prisoner becomes a simple resource. This is biopolitics in its most violent form. Slide 5. Sociological frameworks. Foucault's Biopolitics and the Body as State Resource argues that modern states control life by regulating bodies, health, and total populations. Organ harvesting is the extreme end of this continuum. The state exercises not only the right to punish, but also the right to extract bodily values. Goffman's Total Institutions and Identity Destruction explains how China's re-education centers exemplify the idea that total institutions strip individuals of their autonomy, identity, and sense of agency. Organ harvesting becomes the first stage of this process, where the body is fully objectified. Garland's culture of control argues that punitive systems increasingly target people who are qualified as dangerous others. Falun Gong practitioners have been redefined as such, making extreme interventions appear necessary for social order. Lewis 2018 shows how the ideological construction of Falun Gong as a deviant cult is central to understanding why the state felt justified in performing its extreme measures. This ideological demonization is not simply peripheral, rather, it is a precondition for biopolitical violence. Juncker 2018 emphasizes the persistence of testimonies and rumors despite censorship. Silence, secrecy, and narrative suppression become structural features of the very system at play, sociologically revealing how state violence is concealed. Together, these frameworks show that organ harvesting is not an aberration. Rather, it is structurally compatible with a correctional system that is built on ideological discipline and bodily control. Slide 6. Societal and ethical implications. These practices have enormous social and ethical implications as well as human rights concerns. First off, they challenge global medical ethics. The involvement of doctors and transplant surgeons causes a blur between the line of healing and harm. Rogers 2021 highlights how medical institutions become complicit through data suppression, falsified reporting, and participation in state secrecy. Second, this case forces us to confront what penal systems become in the absence of oversight. Traditional penal goals, such as rehabilitation, deterrence, or retribution, fully collapse. The body then becomes economically and politically useful for the state. Third, this relates to contemporary society. The criminalization of the others is not unique to China. We see this in Western countries where they also disproportionately punish racialized and marginalized groups. While the outcomes do differ, the underlying logic, managing unwanted populations, typically resonates with Garland's theory and maintains the same. Finally, global transplant tourism and organ shortages fuel demand. Gutman et al. 2016 show that foreign patients are often prioritized due to the high profits involved, linking international consumers to China's penal exploitation. Slide 7. Conclusion. To conclude, forcible organ harvesting represents one of the most extreme forms of state violence that exists in the modern world. It collapses the distinction between punishment and exploitation, turning correctional spaces into sites of bodily extraction. Using Foucault, Goffman, Garland, Lewis, Juncker, and Rogers, we can see how ideological labeling, total institutional control, and government secrecy combine in order to make these abuses structurally and physically possible. The case of the Falun Gong religion demonstrates how quickly human rights protections erode when states identify ideological enemies. Understanding this is not just about condemning China. Rather, it is about recognizing how penal power everywhere in the world can transform when unchecked. Ultimately, this topic shows that correctional systems are moral systems. When the priority shifts from human dignity to state control, the consequences can be catastrophic. Here are my resources that I used, and thank you for listening to my presentation.